I don't know if you've got the data or if you've spoken to parents about this, but do you find when it comes to what people look for now in a workplace, obviously pay is always going to be up there, but where do you think flexibility ranks in what parents look for in the workplace?
Well, there have been some surveys carried out recently by family groups, but also by organisations like Deloitte and things like that. And actually, one of the surveys which I put up on my website is that flexibility is the second most important thing that working parents look out for when it comes to applying for a job. Pay remains number one. You can't begrudge anybody for wanting to, earn as much as they possibly can for their work. But actually what people are looking for now is flexibility, and it's not necessarily just parents. I think everybody in this post-COVID world.
And we're rolling. Welcome to season 2 of the Parenting Truth podcast. Today I'm joined by dad of 2 and co-founder of For Working Parents, Amit Kalley. Thanks for joining me, Amit.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining me, because I think we've had this chat booked in 2 or 3 times now, but obviously, juggling working life, family life, podcast life, it's quite hard to get even 30 minutes. So, thank you very much for your time. I think there's so much we could dive into today, but I'd like to start, if it's okay, with For Working Parents, which you co-founded with your wife. It's, I think, a business that supports both organisations and parents directly. So could you tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind founding the business and sort of what motivated you to really focus on supporting parents in the workplace?
Yeah, sure. So we sort of went about creating For Working Parents on the basis that we just felt that parents were, certainly post-COVID, parents were getting a bit of a rough time of things, and I'm not sure how, with organisations trying to get more people back into physical work, i.e. in the workplace. I think during COVID, parents found a really good happy medium between being able to dedicate the time they needed for their children, i.e. pickups, drop-offs, being there when they're unwell, all those kind of things, but also working, but making sure that work was around their family time. And I think, I think the world actually, certainly here in the UK, we enjoyed that. We liked that. We liked the idea that work was around our family as opposed to the other way around. Certainly pre-COVID, if you think back to when your boss would have said to you, I need this done, you would drop everything. You'd drop your kids, you'd drop your life, and you would get that done because that's what society told us we had to do. And I think post-COVID, that narrative has changed a bit for the better, certainly for parents. So we just felt, I used to be a deputy head teacher in secondary education, and decided to leave that and focus on setting up For Working Parents to, as you mentioned, there's 2 strands to it. One is supporting organisations in being more inclusive for their parents and doing a range of things to support them on that. And the other is supporting individual parents through coaching programs who just might be struggling with that balancing parenting and home life, or struggling with an issue that they're having with their child or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I think a lot of obviously heartbreak and challenges came through COVID, but it also changed a lot of people's lives for the better. I mean, when we went into the first lockdown, our little one just turned 2, and I had the fortune of spending more time with him than I could ever dream of. And the idea now that I used to leave the house at 7, do an hour commute in, an hour commute back, and not get back till 6, 5 days a week is just unbelievable. I could never imagine going back to that again. And I think, I don't know if you've got the data or if you've spoken to parents about this, but do you find when it comes to what people look for now in a workplace, obviously pay is always going to be up there, but where do you think flexibility ranks in what parents look for in the workplace?
Well, there have been some surveys carried out recently by family groups, but also by organisations like Deloitte and things like that. And actually, one of the surveys which I put up on my website is that flexibility is the second most important thing that working parents look out for when it comes to applying for a job. Pay remains number one. You can't begrudge anybody for wanting to, earn as much as they possibly can for their work. But actually what people are looking for now is flexibility, and it's not necessarily just parents. I think everybody in this post-COVID world wants a job that actually works around whatever's important to them in their personal life. But certainly flexibility it's come up as number 2 on a number of surveys as something that parents really look out for. And I think what parents are deciding now is that if there's a job that they really want but it doesn't offer flexibility, they'll find another job. They'll go elsewhere. It's not a case of it's one of the big 4 companies or one of the magic circle companies that have to work there. It's a case of if that company can't work around me and my life and my children and my family, then okay, I'll find a job somewhere else. I think we've changed our entire thinking around what a job looks like to us. Yes, we need work to earn money. Yes, a lot of us do work because we're passionate about that particular industry. But ultimately, a lot of us are now deciding that work isn't the be all and end all, and we want employers to work around us and our lives. And if they can do that, if they can offer that, those are the kinds of employers that working parents want to work for.
And you could argue as well, giving parents that work-life balance helps them become, better people in themselves and more motivated to actually work. So when they are on the tools and working, you're getting more out of them, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, surveys will show you that productivity increases when organisations show more flexibility and are more inclusive. So if an organisation tells you as a parent that you can do the drop-offs in the morning and then stay on a little bit late in the afternoon, or you can go home early if you're in the office because your son is unwell, whatever it might be, any kind of flexibility or inclusivity shows. Surveys would show that employers get more out of it. It's a win-win for everybody. It's a win-win. It's a win for the employee because they're getting that flexibility, but it's a win for the employer because you've created a culture of inclusivity, a culture that people want to work in, and therefore they're willing to go that extra mile for you and for their other colleagues because of that environment that's been created.
I'm noticing, so I live in Wales, where maybe the house price is a little bit cheaper than maybe other places in the UK, certainly London. And I work in the tech industry, and what you're finding is a lot of web developers and engineers are actually able now to take London jobs because obviously, like the speed of the train lines and things, you can travel from Wales to London very quickly, but the expectation is they only need to be in the office once a month, so they can justify living in Wales. Obviously they need to be accountable through the week, but as long as they're checking in with their team once a month in the office, that seems to be working for a lot of organisations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, what you'll find with a lot of organizations now is, founders or CEOs or the people that are in control would argue that it doesn't matter to us where you're working from. It doesn't matter to us what your working pattern looks like. What matters to us is that the job gets
Yeah.
done, the work gets done by whatever deadline has been set. If you want to sit up at 4 in the morning and work then because that works best for you, then fine. If you want to sit in the Mauritius because that's where your family background is from and you want to spend time with your parents because they live there and you get the work done, then fine. And I think those kind of companies are the ones that in the future are going to thrive. Of course, you've still got your highly reputable companies that everybody, every grad wants to work for, and they can afford
Yeah.
to have quite old-fashioned policies now because they've got queues of hundreds of people for one job. But I think actually the mentality of even grads and older people now is changing, that we want to work for perhaps smaller firms, more boutique firms that offer a lot of this flexibility where work doesn't necessarily have to feel like that old-fashioned work. And you get those arguments I've seen all over LinkedIn. Some of the older folk that are used to having to sort of grind and work much harder accuse the new generation of just being lazy, just not being willing to work, want everything done for them, everything served to them on a plate. And I don't agree with that. I don't buy into that. Just because it was done a certain way 20, 30 years ago, it doesn't mean it needs to be done in that way 20, 30 years from now. If we can find a society that allows you to work really hard but at the same time, have a wonderful life, then goodness me, why shouldn't we promote that for our parents and for other people?
And we're quite fortunate as well in the world we live in today and the information available. I found, again, because I work in the tech industry, with people working from home, they can jump from a call, they can do a bit of self-development, whether it's watching a Udemy course or a YouTube video, and people are just progressing so quickly within the field. 2 years within the web development world now is probably 10 years way back. So yeah, allowing people to sort of cultivate a workspace that works for them, I think it is really valuable to businesses. So what are the common challenges that you find parents face within the workplace, and how do you does your business help them address those?
Yeah, I think one of the most common challenge that we've certainly found with working with parents is that lack of flexibility. That idea
Right.
that actually, and what companies will often say is that if we allow flexibility for you, we have to allow it for everybody. And I find that really strange because we'll allow it for everybody then. What's the issue with allowing flexibility for everybody? But so parents would often say that, we've got nobody to help pick the kids up from school, and schools school hours are obviously different to working hours, or we've got a child that's unwell. One of us needs to go home to get him from nursery or from school or whatever it might be, and the company doesn't allow it. It's trying to get organisations to understand that flexibility isn't necessarily a sign of weakness, and if you are flexible for one person based on that individual's needs, you can then be flexible for another person based on whatever needs they have. And two of the ways that we really go through that. One is storytelling. So I do a lot of storytelling in the workplace, with the idea of sort of creating empathy in the workplace and creating a more human workplace. And that's based on my own story, I guess, in my sort of parenting journey. Partly losing a parent to cancer. I lost my mother a few years ago to ovarian cancer, and I go through that journey and what that was like as a not even 30-year-old watching your sort of your mum die. And then I then talk about getting married and having our daughter during COVID, and she was born with 3 holes in her heart, and all that kind of going through all that process of dealing with that as first-time parents, thinking your child might die, and COVID, and I never met her consultants, and Great Ormond Street, and emergency surgery for a diaphragmatic hernia, open heart surgery cancelled 3 times, all of that kind of journey we talk about, because I think what that does is, although not everybody would have been through that exact same scenario, parents will have faced at some point in their parenting journey, some sort of issues, and I think if we can create that empathy amongst the workforce, you are more supportive of your colleague if they need to log off early than you otherwise would be if you didn't know what they were going through.
And how were you supported individually when you went through that with your little one?
Well, thankfully it was COVID. I mean, I was a deputy head teacher at that time. I was working, but because it was COVID, a lot of that time was spent at home. And it was very much a case of, look, I need to go to Great Ormond Street. Not because I could go into Great Ormond Street, by the way, because at that point it was one parent allowed in only. So my wife used to do all of the heavy lifting in terms of the medical jargon, and I used to sort of, get us there and then just walk around an empty London in my own thoughts, trying to dial into a WhatsApp call where there was no signal, of course, in the hospital. So I didn't have to be there, but of course, it was our first child, it was our daughter. We're in this unknown world of her having 3 holes in her heart. So it was very flexible. It was a case of, I need to go to Great Ormond Street. And it was often at that time, it was, I remember at one point, it was almost weekly we were having to go into Great Ormond Street to see a consultant, or to have tests done, or to have this done, or whatever it was. And it was just a case of, log off, and that was it. It was incredibly, I was incredibly well supported. But I think that was because we were in such an unknown world at that point. I'm talking 2020, which is, when we went into that first lockdown. Our daughter was born in May in that first lockdown.
Oh, wow.
And she had her surgery in February of 2021, which was when we were in that big second lockdown. So it was a tough time, but very well supported.
And it does take the pressure off, doesn't it? Because my wife and I have had challenges growing our family. We've got 2 little ones, but Laura's been pregnant 7 times. And in 2021, we had a daughter, Noah, that was unfortunately born when Laura was 5 months pregnant. And both me and Laura worked for the same organisation. And they were literally like, don't worry about work. Take all the time you need. This is, a horrific time. Just take the time for both of you to, process this. And Laura obviously needed a lot more time than I did, but just having that support, that empathy, compassion, and no pressure to return, on Monday or the following week. It was just, we could rationalise this and see how we're going to move forward as a family. But, we'll never forget the way that business supported us through that, and it sort of lives long in the memory, and, it gives you that strong connection to the business as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. And there are other organisations that might say being at work is best for you. Get back into work. But I find that a bit two-faced, basically, because it's up to me to decide what I think is best for me. It's not for any organisation or my boss to tell me what's best for me, because my boss needs me back in the office because it needs me working. But no, we were very well supported. My wife's company was very supportive as well. I think they recognised that we were first-time parents. We were in an unknown world. My mother's not alive, so we didn't have the support from my side. My wife's parents, my wife's from Tanzania, so her parents live in Tanzania. We were very much alone, because of course COVID meant that our extended family wasn't allowed to be near us. So it was a really quite lonely time for us navigating all of this, and it put a strain on our relationship as well, because My wife was doing all the medical heavy lifting inside Great Ormond Street, and I was trying to anxiously find out what was going on and wanting to know and asking her questions that she didn't have the answers to. And it was very, very, very stressful as parents, but with the support of whatever we had around us, we managed to get through it.
Yeah, and having the support from the workplace did ease that pressure as well, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
And interestingly, going back to the point about compassion and empathy, for me as a manager, so I manage 6 web engineers. Having everyone working from home sort of, I think, forces the hand of managers to be more compassionate towards their team, because you need to be checking in with them more. You need to be touching base. You need to make sure they've got that nice work-life balance. They're taking breaks from their desk. If they live alone, or if they're in a block of flats, for example, you need to make sure they're prioritising their mental health. So I think it does go hand in hand with the new sort of way the majority of the world are working right now.
Yeah, I think so, and I don't see an issue with that. In fact, on the contrary, I see that as an incredibly positive thing. There
Yeah,
are people for whom working from home doesn't necessarily work, as long as that office environment is available. Should they want to go to an office, then great. But those that do want to work from home, goodness me, we need to check up on people, and we need to make sure that they are, mentally healthy, physically healthy, looking after themselves, because working from home can be lonely, especially if you do live alone. And like you mentioned, you live in a block of flats maybe where you don't have access to green space so easily. And it just takes me back again, because I just think, because I post quite regularly on LinkedIn, and some of the comments that I get from people of a different mindset, which is very much, who cares about people's mental well-being? You're here to do a job, get into the office and do that job. And I find that such a narrow-minded way of thinking, and actually in today's society quite a dangerous way of thinking, because it takes away any kind of human element to the workplace and human element to employees, and it just treats them as though they are just literally come in, do your work. If you're not good enough, off you go. We'll find somebody else. And I challenge that very notion of creating a society that has that kind of treatment towards people.
yeah. I think if you view someone as a piece of resource or a piece of velocity, it's a slippery slope. As a CEO or a manager, you need to be taking, to quote a football quote, you need to be taking the players with you, don't you? And if you're not tapping into them as individuals and just seeing them as a piece of resource to the business, it is a little bit of a slippery slope.
Yeah,
One thing
absolutely.
I was interested to talk to you about. So you support both organisations and parents. How do you find that balance supporting both? Because obviously you need to support parents to ensure they're thriving in the workplace, but then you need to support the organisation to ensure they're still getting productivity and efficiency from the working parents. How do you balance the two?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's just very organic. When there's parents that need help, they reach out, for some coaching. So I retrained when I left my job as a deputy head teacher. I retrained as an ICF coach. So a lot of the work that I do with individual parents is coaching based, and I use the experience that I built up as an educator, and the coaching experience to really support parents that might be struggling with issues they're having with their own children,
Okay.
and trying to navigate a particular challenge they're having with their own children, or struggling to balance that work and home life, and just need a bit of kind of motivation, or just need to feel empowered, or need to just access that greatness that they possess inside of them, but are just struggling to do so. The organisation really is that comes from a combination of people reaching out to me, but ultimately, as you know, in the business world, it's me cold calling and kind of asking organisations, what are you doing for your working parents? Here's some services that we offer. So we do the storytelling keynote sessions. We do internal storytelling, where we train people within the workplace to feel confident to tell their own story once they've heard my story, because everybody's got a story, and if you're willing to tell your own story, it means that the culture you're creating as a workplace is much more empathetic and human. We also offer one-to-one and group coaching services to organisations if they want their parents to get some of those services, and we offer things like parental webinars, upskilling parents, and especially in today's world, where I think parents, all of us as parents, need to be upskilled on a regular basis because of all the things that are going on, out there for our children. So a variety of services that we offer, really.
And it's a very unique time, isn't it, to be a parent? Because, my wife and I often look at each other and say, is parenting this hard for everyone? We both work full time. We both want to do the school drop offs, the school pickups. We want to be as invested as we can be in their lives. And we're trying to do it all. And sometimes, we think, are we making it more difficult than it needs to be? Is it like this for everyone? But, speaking to you, it sounds like, a lot of parents have these challenges, certainly when you've got two working parents as well.
Yeah, and I'm not sure those challenges necessarily get any easier. I think they change as your children grow older. So, the challenges that you and I might face with younger children at the moment
Yeah.
might seem, really sometimes insurmountable, really, because they're just so difficult. But actually, if you talk to parents of children at the top end of primary school, parents of secondary age children, parents of adult children, who they're still responsible for. I think every step there's just a different kind of challenge that we all face, and parents along that entire journey, I think, need support. And I think what I'm finding is that more and more parents are coming forward to be upskilled. They acknowledge, because I think parents can be very arrogant. All of us as parents can be very arrogant. We can be very judgmental. We can think that we know it all and we get it right all the time, and somebody else is a really poor parent, or somebody else's child is really badly behaved. And I think what we need to do is create a community where actually we all acknowledge that there are things that we get right and there are things that we just can't get right and we need help on. We need to upskill ourselves on, some of the work that I do with parents of teenagers, for example, might be workshops on social media, on online safety, on grooming, on pornography, all these kind of things that maybe we don't want to talk about, we don't feel comfortable talking about, but we need to know about. And parents who are willing to upskill and willing to learn, I think, are the ones that are going to thrive.
Often, my wife and I think about the journey we're going to have to go on now with our son. He's 6 in a few weeks, but as he gets older, social media and all that sort of stuff, it's just a whole new world, isn't it, to the one we grew up in.
Yeah, very, very different. And it's not one, I mean, we can, I hear parents talk about it wasn't like this in my day and, not allowed this, but actually we have to accept where we are. Social media is very much a part of our lives. Artificial intelligence is very much going to be a part of our lives. And the interesting one about things like pornography, pornography is a part of our lives and we need to build healthy relationships with it, rather than parents saying, it's outrageous, it needs to stop, I'm banning the internet. It's stopping those kind of knee-jerk reactions and trying to accept that we are in the world that we're in and we need to try and navigate that world as best as we possibly can.
Yeah, it's about embracing it and coming up with ways to guide our little ones through it, as opposed to, like you say, just cutting it off and ignoring it, putting it to the back of our mind, because eventually our little ones will find things like social media as they get older. Maybe they get their own phone and things like that, so you need to be right there with them, don't you?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
So just to flip it around a little bit, obviously you co-founded your business for working parents. So what has been the biggest challenges for you personally, juggling parenting life, setting up a business, and how do you find that work-life balance?
That's a good question. I think the obvious challenge has been the financial challenge,
Right.
because I think working as a deputy head teacher and earning a decent living, and then deciding overnight, basically almost, to just say I've had enough of this, and not having anything to go into. So it took a long time for me to get an idea of exactly what I wanted to do, knowledge of how I wanted to do it, and set the business up. And I do have a steady flow of sort of private clients that I work with, and some corporate stuff that I do. But the financial side of things is inconsistent, because there might be some times where things are really good and there's lots of work coming in, but as with organisations and indeed with human beings, there are some points in the year that are they're pinch points, and spending money isn't necessarily what people want to do at those points of the year. So there can be some quiet times, and also the stress of trying to set up a business without any knowledge really of business, having come from public sector, where you don't need to have that kind of knowledge necessarily. To set that up whilst having 2 children. We've got a near 4-year-old and a near 2-year-old, and the challenges that come with that. Trying to sort primary schools out for our daughter, nursery runs, pickups, all of those things. How to pay for nursery. I mean, goodness me, they're both in nursery 4 days a week. To pay for that, my wife works full time. We've both just set up a second business now. So it's really. Yeah, it's very stressful, but I guess what we try to do is make time for each other. We try to make time for the children. So we do
Yeah.
try and compartmentalize and have things in our diary for where we're going to work on the business. But sometimes business, you just got to crack on with it. And trying to run two businesses as a husband and wife, it can be incredibly challenging. As much as we love each other, I think running two businesses together is bringing up some challenges for sure.
Yeah. And was the overarching drive to set up your own business to be more present at home? Because I appreciate, working in a secondary school, there's limited flexibility, isn't there? It's not as if you can be working from home when you've got to be in the school. So was that one of the main factors for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the idea when my daughter was unwell, and when we started returning back to work after that second lockdown, it was the case of, my wife's company, because she works in industry as an accountant, so she was very much 1 day a week in the office, and I didn't have that flexibility, and I just thought, why should I be punished because of the job that I do? I get it, as in education, it's just not feasible to work from home. So, and I was progressing nicely up the ladder. I had ambitions in the education sector as to where I wanted to be by a certain time, and I was on that journey. But I just thought, you know what? No, I'm not going to miss out on these formative years for my children. I'm not going to be told that I have to be at work at this time and I have to stay until this time because there's work that needs to be done. I want to be in control of my own diary, my own calendar. Of course, from a financial point of view, in the short term and potentially the medium term, it's a hit because you're not making enough money. But the idea, hopefully, if things succeed with the two businesses, as you go forward, you'll be financially much better off as well. But the primary reason was, this kind of envy, I think, that other people were getting to spend time at home with their children and just looking after themselves better, and I was being sort of forced to go into work, and I resented that, and I just decided that enough was enough.
Yeah, because it was quite apparent. Just because obviously I share on social media quite a lot. You could see from what people were posting, parents on the whole that were working from home seemed to be the ones that were thriving. Obviously, it was challenging, a whole new world of being at home so intensely with the family and trying to work. It was very new for a lot of people, but parents seemed to see the benefit, didn't they? The fact that for us personally, by not commuting 2 hours a day, that's 10 hours a week. We were saving, I remember we were paying £250 a month just to park the car in Cardiff. All of these ridiculous savings were, I think, amplified for parents, weren't they? Because, we just got to spend so much more time and be so much more present with our little ones. And I imagine parents on the flip side, key workers and people like yourself, it's probably quite hard to see that, and which was obviously one of the driving factors for yourself.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. Not everybody is going to be able to just up and quit their job. It's not
No.
something that all of us can do. But I was in a position where I was, able to do it. Obviously, had the support of my wife. It wouldn't have been possible if, she wasn't working. And to just sort of set this business up and to see how things go. But it's a business that I'm passionate about. It's an area of work that I'm passionate about. I want to support working parents. I want to make the lives of working parents and parents just generally, better. I want organisations to be more inclusive, and I'm passionate about driving that business forward. And our second business we launched, just a month ago. So we're also
Oh
passionate
wow.
about getting that off the ground and getting that forward. Yeah.
And just to dive into a specific question, what is that like? Do you see maternity leave and paternity leave issues something that comes up for you quite a lot with the people you work with? Just because my wife's returning, or she's returned to work after maternity leave. Obviously, dads get limited to no paternity leave. In the UK, it can be quite challenging. Do you find issues that common issues that women face returning to the workplace after maternity leave?
Yeah, I think there is an issue around the paternity leave side of things. I think a lot of men
Yeah.
are wanting to get more access to things like paternity leave, but there are some great people already doing a lot of work in that space.
Yes.
So it's not necessarily a primary focus of mine, but I have coached parents that are returning, certainly from maternity leave. And I think one of the big issues that some women find, especially if they're in managerial roles, is to reclaim that sense of belonging when they return from maternity leave, because ultimately they've been on leave. The company has carried on without them. The company has survived without them. It's managed without them. And here you are trying to get back into the workplace to reclaim ownership of an area that you had ownership of, especially with mums that want to go back part-time and still have that sort of managerial role. It's trying to find your place, and I have supported some mums in trying to believe that their place is still there and they still can contribute something incredibly positive to their workplace. But yeah, that is a big challenge that I find. It's women on maternity leave or coming back from maternity leave and not necessarily knowing whether they have a place at that workplace anymore.
Yeah. So when our second was born, I took 8 weeks off, which was a mixture of unpaid leave, paternity, and annual leave. And when I returned to work, I had a few of those feelings you've just discussed. But I remember thinking to myself, like, mothers returning after 12 months off to the workplace, there's so many hurdles they have to jump over, even, the fact that the business continues without you. So are you actually needed in the role? I felt that after just 2 months. I couldn't imagine what parents who had the opportunity to take 10, 12 months off with their little ones face. It can be very difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a challenge that I've supported some parents with, and just empowering them to believe that they still belong in the workplace, or ultimately coming to the judgment that maybe this workplace is no longer for me, and I do need to sort of go elsewhere. Excuse me. There's no right or wrong answer there, is there? It's whatever feels right to you as a parent, as an employee.
So there are 3 questions I like to ask every guest on the podcast. So I'm just going to fire them straight over. They're quick fire questions, but feel free to dive in a bit deeper if you want to. So in terms of you as a parent, knowing what you know now, obviously you've had a very unique journey through parenthood so far. What parenting advice would you give yourself before you became a parent?
Wow. Yeah, I think do what feels right for you. I think is something really important, because ultimately, like I say, we can watch other people, and I'm guilty of it as well. I watch family and friends and look at the way they parent and think, wow, maybe we should be doing that, or thank God I'm not doing it that way. It's a question of, we're all on this unique journey. We're all in our own circumstances. Yes, take advice. Yes, seek help when you need it. But ultimately, do what feels right to you as a parent.
For you, yeah. And I'm very conscious of that, actually. Obviously, I share parenting content every day on social media, and it hits different parents differently, and I'm very aware that I want to try and be judgment free when I share stuff, and it's all about just sharing information, isn't it? And just telling parents that, right, the information is here, whether it's talking about co-sleeping, breastfeeding, meltdowns, tantrums. Here's the information. Take that information and do what works for you, your family. Every parent is different, aren't they? Everyone's been raised differently. They've got different triggers, personalities. So just do what works for you. So I think that's a really good tip. So again, you as a parent, what's the one thing you feel you'd like to work on as a parent?
Oh gosh, just one thing.
I know. Yeah, that's a common response.
I could probably reel off a list of things that I'm aware that I need to work on. Gosh, yeah, I think it maybe linked to that first answer, not being too worried about what other people think of, our parenting journey, and also not worrying too much about other people's parenting journey. I think I've been guilty in the past of judging other parents and thinking other parents are much better than us or much worse than us, and I think it's a case of just focusing on our own journey. Our children are our children. They're unique to us. Our circumstances are unique to us. What we've been through is unique to us. Let's just do what we feel is right for us as parents, and be as present as we can for our children on that journey.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Thank you for that. And finally, if you can think of one, what's the best thing for you about being a parent? What's the thing you most enjoy?
Oh God. Yeah, I mean, I could probably tell you lots. It's probably much easier to answer the question, what's the things you don't enjoy? I can tell you lots of things that I don't enjoy.
Okay.
Yeah, but ultimately, the thing that I enjoy the most, I think, on the spot, is just that feeling of love that you didn't know existed. You didn't know. I didn't know that I was capable of feeling love in the way that I feel it for my children. Obviously, you love your own parents in that way. You love your partner, of course, but I think that love and that sense of responsibility as well for your children, that they're going to be a product of your environment, the environment you set for them. And I just think, I know it's not for everybody. Not everybody wants to be a parent, and I know that there are lots of people that struggle to be parents that desperately do. We're very gifted. We're lucky in that sense. But I just feel that feeling of love is something I've never felt before, and I love it. I absolutely love feeling that way about my children.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Amit. And also, thank you for joining me today. Again, like I said, it was difficult to get some time locked in, but I just want to let you know, you're doing amazing work. The fact that you jumped, from the education world to set up a business that supports parents. I don't think parents have enough support, especially when it comes to the workplace in this very unique, time we're living in. So the fact that you're doing such amazing work, I just want to wish you the best of luck with the business, and
Thank you.
I'm sure it will continue. It will continue to go from strength to strength.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Tom. I appreciate your time and all the work that you do, by the way, as well. I mean, it's fantastic, and like you say, it's as long as it comes from a non-judgmental point of view. It's advice, it's guidance, it's for parents to do. That's what we're all trying to do. We're trying to give parents the tools. It's up to them to adapt those tools to their scenario.
And I think, it's just about starting conversations. That's what drives it. Like, back in 2020 when I started the Dad Vibes, the goal was just to get dads talking about parenting, and you're doing it in a different way. You're a dad talking about parenting, and it's just getting dads to engage in conversation, be more conscious of maybe how they want to parent, how they were parented, and how they're going to interact with the little ones. So I think it's really important, and it's great to see more dads sort of jumping on and getting involved in the conversation. So thanks for joining me.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Cool. Cheers, Amit.